Good evening, everybody. Very warm welcome to the meeting. My name's Sarah Veal. I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the Trade Union History and Policy Forum, which is putting on this event. And a few of you might remember me as a former head of Equality and Employment Rights at the TUC. You're all very, very warmly welcome, and I hope there'll be a few more joining us shortly as well. And just to remind you and to make sure you've tuned into the right event, um, this seminar is about trade union. I think it's trade union education, and I think it's the second in a series that we're putting on. And this one's particularly featuring the curriculum. So what's covered on trade union education courses, from training in, for example, employment law, bargaining skills for activists, personal development courses, or courses that are relevant to the trade unionists' particular places of work. Of course, there are other areas that are covered: funding, organising, the role of union learning reps, union strategy, and so on. There will be two further seminars coming up in the autumn, one on delivery and one on policy, but this one is sticking to the curriculum, so if people could focus on that. I know that our speakers will be. I will introduce our two speakers in a minute, but after they've both spoken, I'll open up the floor, as it were, for questions, contributions and general discussion. And there is also a chat box, so by all means pop something in the chat box while you're thinking of it, and we can pick that up as well later on. And just a final thing from me, my day job at the TUC, I worked very closely with Union Learn on producing very good courses on equality issues. And I remember very fondly the women's summer school and all sorts of sessions on equal pay, and quite complex, but really important for us, new areas to work on, and the new laws that protected LGBT people at work, disabled people, BAME members, and so on. So that was also a very important part of the trade union education curriculum. But now I think, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce the first of our two speakers, who is Sarah Jameson. And let me just find your biography on my notes, Sarah, so I make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, Sarah is a policy advisor with the Trade Union Advisory Committee to the OECD TUAC Trade Union. What does that stand for, Sarah? Action, no. What does TUAC stand for?
The OECD does love their acronyms. Sorry. It's the Trade Union Advisory Committee to the OECD.
Through the OECD, that's it. Sorry about that. See how I've been away so long now, I can't remember these things. And that's an international trade union organisation that has consultative status with the OECD and has various committees. Within TUAC, Sarah is responsible for the policy areas of education, skills and digitalisation. Before joining TUAC, Sarah was a senior programme officer with a global human rights non-governmental organisation, where she led research and advocacy on issues related to economic, social and cultural rights. Before that, Sarah worked for the New Zealand government for over 7 years as a lawyer and as a policy analyst. And in those roles, Sarah provided legal and policy advice to the New Zealand, I've just lost the next bit, government, yes? Hold on. To the New Zealand government. Sorry, I'm being very incompetent here. Is that just Sarah? I think I've probably said most of it. So if there's anything I've missed, by all means add it, and let me hand over to you. We're very much looking forward to hearing from you. And apologies for a slightly fumbled introduction, but there we are. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and it's really great to be here with you all this evening. I'll just give a caveat maybe at the outset to my presentation, in that I was meant to be part of one of the other seminars in this series, but this was actually the only date that worked for me. So unfortunately, I'm not a specialist on the curriculum, but I've been told that that's okay, and it's okay for my presentation to have a slightly, I guess, broader and international focus. So my kind of my input is to provide a broad and international perspective on the role trade unions play in skills development more broadly. I'll touch briefly on curriculum, but I think the speaker that's following me will be more of a specialist in that area. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, which post. I think I need to be given permission to do that. That's okay.
Philip, is it possible to give Sarah permission to share her screen? I don't think I can do that on mine.
Yes, I'll do that now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All right.
There you go.
And can everyone see the slides?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I guess I'm going to start with a brief overview of what TUAC does and why it matters, and then go into the ways in which trade unions around the world are involved in skills development, and then I'll conclude with why this matters and the implications for policy. So what is TUAC? So as the Sarah who preceded me mentioned, TUAC is an international trade union organization with consultative status at the OECD. So we engage with various OECD bodies to influence policymaking and ensure that the voice of labour is heard in OECD discussions. In terms of our membership, we have 58 affiliated trade union centres from across the OECD, so representing roughly 50 million workers. And we also have associated members in Brazil, Bulgaria, Indonesia, and South Africa. So thinking about why our work matters and why we exist, why do we care about the voice of labour being heard in OECD discussions? So in a nutshell, really, what the OECD says matters. So the OECD plays a major role in international standard setting. They've developed over 450 international standards covering a wide range of policy areas. That includes economic policy, employment policy, AI, corporate governance, taxation, and education and skills. And the OECD's findings, analysis, and recommendations span a wide field. They guide government decision-making, and they're very influential. The OECD's got over 300 committees and expert groups and holds about 1,400 events per year. So TUAC's mission really is to ensure that OECD standards, recommendations, and analysis reflect the needs and interests of workers. So through our advocacy at OECD committee and working party meetings, and through our engagement with the different areas of the OECD, we work to influence OECD policy and recommendations in areas of importance to trade unions, and to help trade unions make use of OECD recommendations and data. The OECD produces lots of data in their own efforts to influence national governments and employers. So turning to what we do on education and skills, we work closely with affiliated trade union centres and our partner Education International to provide inputs into the OECD's work on education and skills, which encompasses both initial education and lifelong learning. So we actively participate in meetings of the OECD's Education Policy Committee, which is their main body on education policy, and its numerous subsidiary bodies, which include specific working parties on resourcing education systems, on vocational education and training, as well as the Skills Advisory Group. We also have a standing working group on education and skills policy, which brings together representatives from national trade union centres and teachers' unions to discuss current OECD work and feed into that and provide feedback and comments, and also to discuss internally our own priorities and strategy. And that we've got a dual focus really, so in policy issues and priorities in terms of formal initial education, and then the skills and lifelong learning aspect. And yeah, there's a photo of our last meeting there. And I guess more broadly, skills is more broadly a cross-cutting priority area for TUAC. So, and it feeds into the work of various other OECD committees, such as principally the Committee on Employment, Labour and Social Affairs. So TUAC's really working to ensure that the OECD in its work and its analysis and recommendations addresses the need for strengthened adult learning systems and for policy measures to improve access to quality reskilling and upskilling opportunities for workers, particularly in the context of the green and digital transitions. We've also been making the case for greater recognition from the OECD on the role trade unions play and their fundamental importance in skills development and adult learning, and on the need for policies to support this. And the OECD is starting to listen. So whereas previously there seemed to be a real absence of OECD recognition on the importance of trade unions and collective agreements in building more accessible and better functioning skills systems, recent OECD outputs have emphasized the importance of social partners and social partnerships. So in 2019, for example, in a policy brief they published called Getting Skills Right, Making Adult Learning Work in Social Partnership, the OECD underscored the key role of social partnership in what they term as getting adult learning systems ready for the future. So they noted that involving employers as well as trade unions in shaping adult learning policies is essential because both hold vital information on what training needs are, where priorities should be set, and how best to deliver training accordingly. And this may enhance successful implementation of policies. So bringing in the voices of social partners can help strengthen the adult learning system in general. And they went on to correctly recognize that the involvement of employers and worker representatives is relevant at all stages of the skills policy cycle, from problem identification and agenda setting to policy implementation. So it's a good start, but we're continuing to push for, I guess, more concrete and more specific recognition from the OECD of the unique and different ways in which unions can enhance, shape, or support skills strategies or training programs, and of the policy conditions that are required to support or facilitate this. So in terms of the different ways, so this is the second part of my presentation really, and it's going to be a bit of a mapping of a quick mapping of the different ways trade unions are involved in skills systems throughout OECD countries. And they play many different roles at various stages of the life cycle. And I've grouped these into four stages. So design and governance, facilitating access and take-up, delivery, and quality assurance. So in terms of design and governance, the first key thing really is their involvement in anticipation of training needs. So as one of the key functions of job-related adult learning is making sure that people have the skills that are needed in the labour market, we need to first understand the demand for skills in the labour market in order to have effective upskilling and reskilling policies. And this is particularly crucial in light of the fast shifting landscape of the digital transformation, the seemingly daily developments in AI, and also the green transition as well. And so trade unions, as we all know, have unique insight into the skills and training needs of their workers, and thus have a really invaluable contribution to make in exercises to identify which skills are needed in the current labour market. And these are often referred to as skills assessment and anticipation exercises. And trade unions are involved in skills assessment and anticipation exercises in 59% of countries across the OECD, or at least that's the most recent statistic. I think that's from 2021. Although their involvement at this stage does exist on the spectrum, so taking the lead in such exercises to purely consultative. And in a number of countries, this participation in assessment and anticipation exercises takes place through their participation in skills councils, which are independent bodies that provide a forum for different stakeholders to discuss skill supply and demand and challenges and policy responses. So there's many examples of this throughout the OECD and OECD countries, but one example is in Finland. You've got trade union participation in the 9 industry-specific anticipation groups that make up the broader Skill Anticipation Forum, which is an expert body of the Ministry of Education and Culture and the Board of Education. And different groups use various methods to anticipate future skills needs and make recommendations based on this. So related to this, trade unions are also involved across the OECD in the development and setting of adult learning strategies, which provide a framework for adult learning policy in a particular country, regional sector. So again, many examples of this, but Germany's recently launched in 2019, their national skills strategy was developed through tripartite social dialogue. So that brought together federal ministries, federal states, trade unions, employers' organizations, and economic partners. Thirdly, and the speaker after me and the discussion will pick up on this, I'm sure, is the involvement in curriculum design. Of actually shaping the curriculum for adult learning, and also initial education as well. And in Austria, their trade union confederation has been involved in negotiations on the curricula for basic digital education. So the second, I guess, category, access and take up, and this really needs, I can just go over it quite quickly because I'm sure we're all aware of the crucial role that trade unions play in negotiating individual training rights and the conditions to ensure workers can exercise them in practice through collective bargaining. So collective agreements address many of the issues that have been shown to operate as barriers to participation in adult learning for many workers. So covering issues like financing, training leave arrangements, and job protection during or after training. So in terms of just a couple of examples. So in Sweden, you had 2 national agreements concluded by social partners earlier this year, which included an individual right to training and a right to financial support to participate in courses to improve skills for both workers and those currently not in employment. And in the manufacturing and mechanical engineering industry in Italy, an individual right to training is also provided for in the National Collective Labour Agreement, with each employee entitled to at least 24 hours of training during each contractual period. In some countries as well, you've got unions playing a role in either setting up or managing training funds. This is the case in the Netherlands, where Dutch trade unions frequently negotiate with employers to establish training funds. There are about 125 of these, which are governed by social partners. And then, as was referred to in the introduction to the session, you've also got the role trade unions play in encouraging and supporting take-up and building trust and among workers to express their training needs and to actually engage in training. So the example that was referred to is Union Learn and the training they provide for union learning representatives who really play a key role in embedding learning in the workplace. Thirdly, trade unions also play a role in the actual delivery of training, and there's evidence to indicate that due to their close relationship with members, they really do play a key role in facilitating access when they deliver. So for an example from slightly further afield from my previous examples, just to mix things up, it can be found in Brazil. So they're the 3 largest trade union federations run a school of tourism and hospitality, which offers training programs focused on jobs in the sector, as well as courses on more transversal and skills and general knowledge. And finally, trade unions also play a role in many countries in a sort of quality assurance role. So they can be involved in the certification of adult learning providers, which was what happens in Flanders in Belgium, or in Sweden as well, providing information to the Labour Market Advisory Council, which provides information to the body that oversees adult learning providers. So that was a quick, I guess, whistle-stop tour of the various different ways in which unions are involved in skills development across the world. And I guess as a more general remark, I think it's important to note here that the extent of trade union involvement in shaping adult learning systems varies across countries. So you range from trade unions having a very active role in decision-making and management of skills and adult learning systems or aspects of it, to having just a consultative role only on policy proposals developed by the government. So there's this useful table that was published by the OECD in 2019 where they try and break it down, the different jurisdictions and the extent of social partner involvement. I was trying to figure out what other meant, but I couldn't see it anywhere. I think it was just maybe not able to be readily classified into one of the three previous categories. An example of country with overall strong trade union involvement in governance of skills and adult learning systems is Iceland. So their employers and trade unions jointly define and manage the training system through their education and training center. And that's been happening since about 2003. And social partners jointly own and manage the center together with the Ministry of Finance and an association of local authorities in the country. And that the centres involved at all, well, it plays the role at all stages of the skills development policy cycle. So identifying training needs, developing the programs and curricula, developing and monitoring the validation of non-formal and informal learning, supervising career guidance and quality assurance. And it also administers the education fund, which is financed through a levy paid by employers. This is in contrast to countries such as one of my own countries like New Zealand, where trade unions are only afforded a consulting role on aspects of the governance of skills systems. So in terms of why this matters, so why TUAC is pushing for greater recognition of trade union involvement at the OECD. So I guess that the starting point is that evidence at the moment, well, evidence continues to show that participation in adult learning and on-the-job training is low, particularly for those workers who are likely to be most in need of training in the context of the green and digital transitions. So the OECD, they put out many mammoth publications each year, which I'm sure very few people read from start to finish, but contain some very useful data. And this year's edition of Education at a Glance showed that only roughly slightly more than 1 in 10 adults participate in non-formal education and training, and that this decreases for those with lower levels of educational attainment. So only 4% of adults with below upper secondary attainment participate in job-related education and training. You've also got participation in job-related education and training decreasing with age. So it's 6% among 55 to 64-year-olds across the period surveyed, compared to 10% among 25 to 54-year-olds. And concerningly, the OECD has also found this data to indicate that participation in job-related learning activities is lower among workers in jobs that are considered to be at a high risk of automation. So, for example, on average across the country surveyed, only 8% of adults working in the manufacturing sector participate in non-formal job-related education and training. And it was the same for adults with jobs in construction or transportation. And so recognition of trade union involvement matters because research shows that trade unions can promote greater access to training and development in the workplace. So in the United Kingdom, for example, the TUC has found that 37% of union members get regular training and development opportunities in the workplace, compared with only 22% of non-unionized employees. And there was a survey of those who participated in learning or training facilitated by Union Learn Fund projects, and 70% of learners said that they would not have engaged in the learning or training on offer without the support of their union. more broadly, in terms of strengthening the skills in adult learning systems, the OECD has also recently found in two qualitative research projects it undertook in 2020 and last year that social partners' involvement in the governance of adult learning systems can have positive impacts on the performance of these systems, making them more resilient during COVID and ensuring that policies are more successfully implemented. So recognizing the importance of trade union involvement in skills development takes us to the question of how we support, facilitate, and promote this. And the key message here is really quite simple, but it is something, well, we do have to keep continuing to really bang on the table at the OECD. It's that trade union involvement in skills development really turns on the existence of policy frameworks that support and promote social dialogue and collective bargaining, as well as the resources that trade unions have at their disposal to participate and be involved in such systems. The OECD, to some extent, makes this link in its 2019 Employment Outlook, Negotiating Our Way Up. And this publication really does underscore the critical importance of collective bargaining in addressing inequalities and in ensuring that all workers benefit from the green and digital transition. And this publication does include a specific section on the role played by trade unions in skills development. So it's a start, but we're really, I guess, our broader focus at TUAC is working to push the OECD to build on this and integrate this point throughout its future work on improving participation in adult learning, and in light of future work on upskilling and reskilling for the twin transition. I'll leave it there and hand over to the next presenter, who will have more of a focus on curriculum, I think. But yeah, happy to take questions and integrate this into part of the broader discussion a bit later. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very, very much indeed. That was fantastic. Lots of really valuable information in exactly the allocated time slot. So thank you so much. Is it possible for you to share your slides? If you would send them to us, we can then circulate them to participants. That would be fantastic. And I was especially taken by what you were saying about the link between trade union education and skills development. And I would really, really hope that's going to be of key interest to an incoming, we hope, Labour government, because it's been sadly neglected over the last 14 or so years in the UK. I won't take questions quite yet, if people will forgive me. What I'm going to do is take the other Sarah, and then we'll do questions and comments and contributions after that. Some of you will have noticed the amazing spectacle of not one, not two, but three Sarahs on the panel. There's nobody who isn't called Sarah on the panel. So participants can't go wrong if you just say Sarah. Anyway, I don't think I've ever been in that situation before. I don't know about the other two Sarahs, but it's fascinating. Anyway, our second speaker is Sarah Hayes, who is the Head of Learning and Organising Services for Unison, the UK's largest union, with more than 1.3 million members. Unison represents staff both in the public and the private sector who provide public services across health, local government, police and probation, education, community and care services, energy and utilities. Sarah's responsible for delivering the training programme for all activists and elected reps, as well as an extensive member learning programme through the Unison College. So over to you, Sarah. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And as you said, we at Unison, we cover that broad spectrum of kind of what public services used to be, what public services will hopefully be in the future, whether they're delivered by private, by community, or still within the public services. I want to start with a bit of an apology that I do have some slides that I'm very happy to share afterwards, but I am on holiday in Norfolk with the family, so I have very, very limited kind of Wi-Fi, so I wanted to make sure that you hear and see me rather than focusing on any other slides. I'm on the Norfolk Broad, so the water is kind of rising around me, so we all had to invest in wellies, and hopefully we won't be evacuated this evening. So thank you. Anyway, I'm going to be really focusing my talk on kind of our curriculum at Unison in order to ensure that our reps and our activists are informed, they're engaged, and they're supported in the work that they do. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll also talk about the member learning program that we have for all our members, and how we've really kind of looked at it very recently to create what is called the Unison College, which is an offer for all members and for all activists to ensure that they have the skills, they have the knowledge, but more importantly, they have the confidence to carry out what they want to do in their kind of union life, but also importantly, what they want to do in their work life and in society as well. And that's a kind of a big thing, which really ties into what the previous Sarah was saying. It's about engagement, but it's about society and how unions can play a part of that. So we'll look about what curriculum looks like, the design, but I'll focus on some real issues actually that we're really grappling with, and with that the opportunities, and I'm going to give you some honest feedback of where we are within Unison too. So I hope you'll welcome that. Where we start with all our courses is that we have our working together guidelines, and you'll be very familiar with those in education in terms of ensuring that you're creating a safe learning environment. But for our learners, they are equally more important. It's about setting that scene, because we're aware that many of our learners may not have been in a classroom, or equally may not have been on on a Zoom virtual call or whatever for quite some time, and so we always do spend a lot of time and a lot of effort to consciously make sure that we do create a safe learning environment, and so that's trying to get rid of any jargon, whatever skills they talk about, and give it a language, and really trying to foster what those of you who may be aware of kind of Nancy Klein's kind of time to think, that no one has truly entered a classroom until they have spoken. And so we spend a lot of time to talk about the kind of the appreciation, ensuring of attention, the importance of diversity of opinion and diversity of where people have come from. But we want to create ease. We want to encourage people. We want to make sure that our curriculum is not just about content, but it's about feelings. It's about how people actually have that opportunity and have that place to learn and to ultimately have confidence and to move on, and that's really where we're at. So for me, when I look at kind of curriculum, as I say, it's that definition of not just what is learnt, not just what the syllabus is, but it's everything that happens in that classroom, whether it's be virtual or face-to-face, and everything that influences what is done in that session and in that learning environment. And so it's so important for us to consider not just the content of the actual thing, but actually creating that environment for people to ensure that they feel confident to kind of, it might just be one learning intervention, but they will go on and they will do the best of what they want to do and achieve that outcome. So for me, kind of with my academic head on, then looking at kind of curriculum design, I think that our curriculum is not just about the product. So it's not just outcome focused, whether it's for our activists or for our members in terms of the job that they do. It's not just the process either in terms of how they get there and where they're going to go. And it's not just transmission in terms of one-way knowledge, in the fact that as a tutor, I'm imparting information. It is about creating that community and creating that praxis that we can change, we can change stuff together. And it really is creating that feeling that we're important to do. So for Unison, and when I've previously studied curriculum, we've looked at it as a bit of a garden, and so our garden of kind of trade union is our curriculum is cultivated by the trade union movement itself, but it's also about those outside factors, isn't it? It's as a learner, how do I give them the confidence to firstly
Oops. Sarah, I think, can you hear us, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm back.
Hey, sorry, off you go.
No, that's okay. It's about creating that first step, walking into that classroom, and so therefore that all their experience, all their knowledge that they're bringing is so important to us as well. And so how our curriculum looks like is it's not a set syllabus in its total. It's looking at all the other factors. It's looking about the experience that a tutor can bring. It's looking about what the learners can bring themselves, and really every session is about how it can be evolved. And so the methods that we use in terms of our delivery, it's no surprise to you that obviously we would prefer face to face, but we have been using asynchronous learning, kind of e-learning or online. We've also been using virtual, and we've also had a blended approach, and it has been really interesting for us, both for our member learning but also for our active education, to really kind of look at the trends since we've kind of come out of COVID, look at the trends about who engages in what, and the importance of that, and how do we reach our members that may not have gone into a classroom and may well not get the skills to become further in their education and further in their career. So, for example, our domestics and our wanting to become a healthcare assistant, not being, and it might well be might be for the NHS, or it might be for a community and a private provider. And how do they actually access the training that they need to go on and to progress? I'll come and talk a little bit more about some live examples of that. I'll talk about Wendy and some others who have shown to us how that might work. But it also means for us that with such a broad scope in terms of reaching out across public services, having a clear programme and a clear curriculum for our activists and for our members, what does that look like? Well, it means that we have a national programme and a clear structure for our activists. So for our activists, for our stewards, for our health and safety reps, and for our union learning reps, we have a clear outline that as soon as they are elected, that they must attend and must continue some training on data protection within 3 months. We have then outlined that within 12 months, they must carry out their mandatory induction training. Within 2 years, they must carry out further equality and diversity training. And then within 3 years, if they bargain and negotiate with employers, they must carry out further anti-racism training. And then within 5 years, they must carry out some refresher training, and the refresher training will update them in employment law, but it will also update them in our policies and it will where we are in terms of kind of the politics and the lay of the land. And we do that for our stewards, equally for our health and safety reps, and also for our union learning reps. And we've got that clear mandatory programme that we expect all our activists to follow. We also have a clear programme for our members in terms of looking at where they are, that we're asking for a union learning rep to speak to them, to find out, as Sarah said, about kind of that skills analysis is so important, and that skills analysis of where they are and identifying if they are employed by a national employer that has a learning agreement. So for our NHS, we've got the part of Agenda for Change is the National Learning Agreement there. Whether if it's local government, we've got the Green Book, and therefore there's a National Learning Agreement there. With our multi-academy trusts in schools, there's some nationally agreed learning agreements, and so using those and utilising those as part of our campaign, our kind of organising and recruitment campaigns, but equally making sure that our members have got the sufficient skills they need to move on whatever they wish to do, and so we're creating kind of cohorts of learners. We're creating these kind of communities of practice, whereas before we would have had just a national program, a training program that we advertise it, you go on, you go on to the training, and it might be at a TU Ed college, it might be at an FE college, and the realities now is that our partnerships with those TU Ed colleges and FE colleges are going by the by, despite us campaigning and trying to keep them, which means that we've got to look at completely different ways of reaching out and providing training for our members and our activists. And so this is like a real live issue with us for the moment, is that how can we sustain kind of a training our activists and reaching out to our members when TU Ed colleges are on the wane. And so it's who tutors them. Is it our organisers? Is it our staff that are tutors? And there's a capacity issue there with all the bargaining and negotiating and everything else they do. Do we look to the TUC with the TUC and their fantastic tutors that they've got, but equally we have adapted our courses to make sure that they are relevant to the reps and the particular bargaining and particular case studies that is linked to them. Do we look to lay tutors, train up a body of lay tutors, of which we need to make sure that they are supported, that there's quality insurance there, and there's kind of vicarious liability issues there too? Or do we look to external organisations, where we have external organisations, and that could be like partners? I'll list our partners later, but do we do that, or do we? And really, it is about how do we create those communities of practice within our members and with our activists, and do we want them to be as local as possible? Do we want to reach out to them to meet the shifts, the shift workers? Do we want to reach out to those women who have got caring responsibilities? Do we want to reach out to our members who just do not have the time and the barriers of the capacity and working it? And how do we do that? And we can only do that locally, and we can only do it by offering many different variations. So having our national programme, having a local offer, having something that is blended, but making sure that there may be someone else going along with them as well. And that's where we found where you come along and take a buddy. And it might sound a bit twee, but actually it's been the most effective way of ensuring that our members, our domestics, our cleaners, our security, that would never have gone and either attended an online version or a face-to-face version of training. They've been going with somebody else. We've gone to them as local as possible, and that has been the way forward. It creates quality assurance issues. It creates capacity issues. It creates issues about ensuring that how do we accredit, and how do we ensure that everyone has that same experience that is quality proofed. But how it's proving to be that the most effective way. And if we can ensure and reach out to our members and to our reps, the training as part of an organising campaign, that all our staff and all organisers are on board and understand that learning is so important to everything we do. It's not just about, you don't just separate representation, you don't separate bargaining, you bring learning as a part of it, and that is where we have had some real opportunities. Unison's just embarked on a big organising strategy where we've actually, as part of our campaigns, learning has been the centre of them. And we've reached out to multi-academy trusts. There has been a learning offer that has been central to that. We have been running campaigns in job evaluation in the health within the NHS for band 2 healthcare assistants, and learning and trying to and understanding that the jobs that they do are so vital, and every time they do a little bit more and do a little bit more, there's an expectation that they do more and that they do more, and actually if we all work together, then we will get that pay for them that they deserve, and that has been absolutely fundamental to that campaign. Sarah talked a little bit about how unions have been integral in terms of the skills analysis, understanding that AI and green skills are something that's there within working lives and with working with employers, and that's where our union learning reps have been telling us that. And so, we have training on green skills, we have training on understanding AI and understanding it not just from as a member and what that might mean for me and how to engage that in my life, my personal life, but then through to bargaining and negotiating for our senior activists and our leaders as well, and having that. So our skills and our knowledge is not just for induction training for our reps. It is fun. It's that skills and that knowledge. We're trying to ensure that it's there for the members and right through to our activists, and that's and having a clear pathway. I think whilst we were on kind of in England anyway, where we had the Union Learning Fund, we were able to try different things. Some of us have bemoaned the loss of the Union Learning Fund, and I obviously we've still got it in the devolved nations. That Union Learning Fund, the loss of it has still created these opportunities where we have been able to ensure that participation, not just from a union perspective, but participation in society, participation in politics, with a small p, has been introduced back into our kind of member learning program, and we have seen actually kind of the increase of our members moving on in terms of their union and participation, but also moving on and getting for us to actually achieve real successes in bargaining and negotiating campaigns, which have had real impact on their lives. And that has been, it's been one of those things. I want to talk a little bit about the partners that we work with as well. Again, it's a real live issue, but it's also created opportunities. Sarah mentioned about the social partnership networks, and we're involved in the social partnership network along with the Open University. But that creates access to members to open up to, if they're interested in access to higher education. But it fundamentally creates a pathway for our members right before even they're dreaming or thinking of accessing education in higher education. We're taking that pathway right back to saying, well, what does a healthcare assistant need? What skills do they need? What knowledge do they need? And how can we use education entities like the Open University to reach out to us? We also work with the WEA, the Workers' Employers Association, and then we've got other organisations and providers that we use as well, like the Skills Academy and Show Raters and the Red Card. So we've got kind of very specific providers on equality, on diversity, and some very fundamentally on kind of skills. We've also been integrally involved in kind of developing the apprenticeships for some, specifically for in health and across local government as well, and creating those skill training programs that for those occupational groups, and creating the CPD. Our member learning offer now under the Unison College is moving to have clear pathways for an occupational group within the public sector that is full of those transferable skills. So it's that we will not want to replace what an employer should be providing, but what we want to do is ensure that we've got those transferable skills, whether it's speaking with confidence, so speaking clearly in a handover meeting at an end of a shift, so then speaking with confidence maybe at a union meeting, so then maybe then speaking confidence you know, at a larger event as well. And so we can see that kind of those transferable skills moving through. And then lastly, I really want to give you some kind of real life examples. And so I mentioned Wendy. Wendy is a domestic down in the southwest, and she came on our leadership development program for women and for black workers. And she was nominated. She didn't hold a union position. She was not an activist. She was, but she was there. She was someone that just got started to ask questions. She was someone that would ask questions. She left school without any qualifications, and came onto our leadership program. And our leadership program was not accredited. It was purely helping her to network, helping her to create that community of practice within with other women, with other black workers. She kept asking those questions. Wendy is now entering her formal education for the first time in I don't know how many years. But equally, she has been recently appointed to our senior leadership, so to our NEC, our National Executive Council. Along with her was Jude. Now, Jude, when we first met Jude, she kept saying that she was just. She was just. She worked in local government. Jude was just. I'm just this. I'm just that. And then towards the end of our leadership development program, Jude understood that actually I can. And her light bulb moment when we asked them at the end of the course was, actually, I can. And this is it. This is what our curriculum is about. It's about identifying that it's not just the skills for a member for their work. It's not just the knowledge that they need potentially in terms of their union role either, but it's the confidence. And it's the confidence for them to move on. And this is where kind of our curriculum in its broadest sense, we're really keen to explore. And so our Unison College, our kind of, it's almost my elevator pitch whenever I talk now, is that it's from I'm just to I can, and that's what it's about. We have I've got many other examples in terms of people that have moved on and they've either become union learning reps, or they've not actually participated further in the union, but they have in their own lives, and they have in their working lives, and it's been through this whole importance of our curriculum, ensuring that we're informing people, we're engaging people, but we're also supporting them through whatever journey that they want to take. And for me, that's the bit that's kind of vitally important, that we're informing. You know, we want to inform obviously future government policy, and we want to make sure that there is that right to have paid time off for training, both qualified and quantified time, that we were working with those national learning agreements, that we've got that activist program there for all of our reps, and we're really embracing and supporting the role of the union learning rep. But equally, we're working with individuals, and we're working with communities within their workplaces to create the future leaders, whether it be nursing students that we have within our skills and within our skills council and our leadership program for healthcare students, or whether it be a universal offer that we can create, that's a universal offer but different for every member, so that any member that engages in our learning, they do move from I'm just to I can, and they understand that there is something available there for them. I'll leave it there.
Sarah, thank you very, very much indeed. And again, another really fascinating and very interesting contribution from you. Incredible amount of impressive, very hard work that you're doing in what are clearly challenging circumstances. And thank you for your openness, actually, in sharing some of the challenges that Unison, and I'm sure other unions as well, are facing, and giving us some living examples as well. That's always really important. So what I'm going to do now is ask for questions or contributions from people who are participating here. If I'll take groups of 3, because that I think normally allows more people in. And if people could use the hands up emoji, because that means I can definitely see you. I can't see all the faces of the participants from where I am. So if people can use the little hands up emoji to ask a question. And just while you're getting ready to do that, just to say that there is a question to Sarah Jameson in the chat box from Alan Tuckett, who says he found your contribution fascinating and wondered how far TUAC draws on thinking at the ILO or the UNESCO Lifelong Learning Institute in Hamburg. So that's perhaps one question to t'other Sarah. But do we have any other questions to either Sarah? Tom Wilson.
Again, thanks very much indeed to all 3 Sarahs, actually. Very, very interesting presentations. First question, I've got 2 questions, if that's all right, Sarah V.
Yes, of course.
And this one is to Sarah J. Very, very interesting to see the extent to which other countries and other trade union systems are working very closely with employers in a way which kind of demonstrates to those employers, presumably, what more they can do if they work with the union. And I guess my question to you is, does that demonstrator effect help to establish more appetite amongst employers? And if so, does that affect what employers are prepared to put on the curriculum? In other words, if the union can show that there is big demand amongst their members for, let's say, doing more on IT, just to take an example randomly, does that then encourage the employers to offer more IT training paid for by the employer? And do those employers then need to be kind of persuaded by seeing that the union can show that such training has an impact, recruits workers, the workers like it, they progress well, all that sort of stuff? So that's one set of questions. You know, the extent to which working with employers shows what can be done through a curriculum for adult learners in the workplace. And then a kind of related question to Sarah H. And I do hope the floodwaters have stopped rising, Sarah, because it must be quite anxious, really. And that's about marrying together the curriculum for an activist, in other words, employment law, that kind of thing, and the curriculum for other members who may not necessarily want to be activists, but you know, have all sorts of learning needs, whether it's about learning for work or learning for just personal development and enjoyment, really. And how do you kind of stitch together those different kinds of learning into a kind of coherent curriculum? So there are 2 questions, I'm afraid, but
that's fine, Tom. No, very good questions. Thank you very much. And does anyone else have a question or a contribution at this stage? Okay, well, let's ask the 2 speakers to respond. I think some of those were directed. In fact, I think all of them were directed at either one or the other. So Sarah J, do you want to go first?
Yes, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Alan and Tom, for your questions. I guess answering Alan's question first, we do draw on ILO thinking on and ILO standards, ILO research as well, and they're kind of their basis and their calls for a recognised right to training is something we refer to quite often. But in addition, and the same with the UNESCO, we do refer to UNESCO work as informing our analysis and advocacy on OECD publications. However, it's always important as well to actually get information from affiliated members about what's actually happening in their specific national jurisdictions and what's happening on the ground as well. So it's trying to incorporate a broad lens. And then in terms of Tom's question, I've got to actually be honest, I actually don't know at this stage. One would hope so. And particularly, and I thought the example of IT is particularly pertinent in the context that there's been lots of talk at the moment about skill shortages related to digital skills, and specifically related to skills to work with AI and digital tools more broadly. And there's a big narrative about skill shortages that are a challenge in many countries. And you would think with in terms of demonstrable union effect, in terms of encouraging take-up, in terms of encouraging in enabling and facilitating take-up among workers as well, and the positive results that would function as an encouragement and as an incentive to offer more training. And unfortunately, I'm not sure to what extent this is the case in reality.
Thanks, Sarah. And t'other Sarah?
I'll start with that the digital skills one. Actually, Excel is the most popular course, hands down, that for our members, and that is people who really need understand Excel in their working lives, but equally people who need Excel not in their current job, but see the need to understand what Excel is, to kind of move on. And I just found that absolutely fascinating, that hands down that has been the most popular one. It's part of integrating our kind of member learning and our activist training. This is where kind of the Unison College really has played a part. And so we've created Unison College last year. This was something that our General Secretary, Christina McAnee, was extremely keen to ensure, and was one of her key election pledges in becoming the leader of Unison. And it really is to embrace and bring together not just learning for members, but training for activists and supporting learning along that. And so if you take something like digital skills, we will have kind of learning for members, kind of the understanding of from how to turn a computer on, and to kind of creating that community of learners to try and understand what digital skills they may need, and hopefully utilising a union learning rep to support them through that process. Then right through to for our activists, utilising key digital skills in their role, whether that be campaigning and using social media to try and get a support, try and get the ballot pledges out, and to get people to actually vote for industrial action, and everything in between, to be quite honest. And so that's something that we have seen, and that what we're trying to introduce is that at the end of every learning intervention, whether it's a member or whether it's an activist, that there is an ask, and there's an ask at the end of the training intervention. And that's not just a kind of, well, what's your next step might look like, but it's something very specific. It could be, something as simple as taking a pledge or completing a survey, but it will sit, but it's something as engaging them as being part of something, as well as for them individually about understanding what their next learning step might be. And that's where we've really tried to bring together the kind of the member and the activist, and create that kind of curriculum that makes sense, that there is a real pathway there if people choose to take it, but not putting their arms behind backs, that people can stop at any point in this journey, and making that absolutely clear too.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I've seen a couple of other hands, so I'll take both of those. First, John Holford, followed by John Edmonds. So John. We've got lots of Johns and lots of Sarahs. It's amazing, isn't it? So John Holford first. John. Oh, John, you're muted. That's it. John, you're something wrong with your sound, I think. Is anyone else having trouble with hearing John's sound?
Yeah, it was weird.
John, try again, because I can't make head or tail. There's a noise coming out, but it's not a language that I recognise. I'll tell you what, John, if I take, no, it's not. If I take John Edmonds, if you could perhaps turn your sound on and off again, and maybe it'll, yeah, brilliant. I'll take you, John Edmonds, and then we'll go back to John Holford. John Edmonds. You're muted as well.
You're muted, John.
John, you're muted. John, you're muted.
And I have been struggling to get out of that particular trap. This is a question for Sarah H. Sarah, at various times you've talked about the programme, particularly for activists, that goes out for 5 years. Two questions about that, if I may. The first one is, at what point do you bring in what is effectively a long-term obligation? And how much opportunity does the individual have to choose when they take these things and perhaps when they can opt out? So how much involvement in the decision-making is the individual activist? Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Have we got t'other John back? John Holford?
He's just on his way back.
Okay, let's just give him a couple of seconds.
Here he is.
Here he is. John Holford, do you want to have another go? See if we can hear you. John? Well, I'll tell you what, Sarah's, why don't you...
John, do you want to test your audio?
Yeah.
Is
it this
That's
John
great.
you're referring to?
It's much better. Yeah, we can hear you now. Why don't you... Yeah.
Okay, so you want me to speak rather than John Edmonds?
I'd taken John Edmonds while we were letting you reconnect.
I'm sorry,
So
I was
so
out of the system whilst
I'm sorry.
Speaking. Okay, yeah, there are too many Johns in all their work. There used to be too many Johns, and now they're too few. Yeah, look, I wanted to ask about or just in a sense raise the question of the shaping of the curriculum in trade union education. I mean, this is one of the big debates of the past. Was around, well, there are several. One was around the nature, the extent to which individual participants in the classes would be able to shape the content, or how far that is prescribed in advance. So that kind of debate. There was another kind of debate which was around whether the content of, these are overlapping debates. Another one was around whether the content of trade union education should be principally about the practicalities of the workplace and negotiations and collective bargaining and those kinds of things, or whether it should be about, why capitalist society is the way it is and all that kind of thing, or indeed whether it should be about literature and broad, the better things of life, if you see what I mean. And I just wonder how far those debates are, so one way of looking at the last sort of half century or so in adult education and lifelong learning generally is to say that there's been a thinning down of the content of what is legitimate adult learning from, a broad sort of curriculum, a broad, I mean, lots of words, liberal, etc., down to something which is really linked to workplace skills and getting on in life and that kind of stuff. I just wondered how far that kind of debate exists within contemporary trade union education circles, and whether it's something which needs to be rekindled.
Thanks very much, John. We just got slightly
scrambled. Raised at the UK and to with Sarah Jameson at the sort of international end.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Thank you both, Johns. So should we take Sarah Hayes first this time?
Okay, so John E's question, in terms of the 5-year kind of pathway that I identified, is very much down to an individual. What we have tried to do is, and if I can be completely honest, as it stands at the moment, an activist, once elected, will then reach out as much as possible to them, and we will reach out, we will email them, we will write to them, we will hope that they'll be embraced within their branch and embraced with their employer, and that a mentor will be kind of given to them straight away to give them that support. As I said, we want them to be kind of informed, engaged, but ultimately supported, so that they know that, and they can curate kind of the way forward, and be clear of what training that they may well need. Those courses that I identified are the mandatory courses within kind of the data protection, our mandatory induction training, kind of equality, challenging racism, and then that refresher course. And there is that timescale that we kind of, as part of our guidelines, expect in terms of not just to ensure that they are fulfilling their duties in terms of the kind of employment legislation, but also so they're fulfilling their duties within our kind of democratic organisation as well. That being said, we have got an offer and a programme that's a lot wider than that mandatory pathway, and we have what's called U-Train, and it's based on kind of an underground map. So an activist can go any which way they want on that underground map, as long as they hit those certain stations. And so if they need further training on kind of speaking with confidence, or analysis, or that kind of digital skills as we identified, or communications, then that's available for them too. And we in recent years, there's been a real call actually for trade union history to come back and to be identified within our programme, as well as politics, and politics, understand not just for our activists, but also as part of our member learning programme, to understand kind of where, not just where trade unions come from, but also how, as an individual and as a society and as workplaces, that things can change, and we can change things, and how they can engage. And so that has been one of the reasons why we're introducing asks at the end of each of our courses. So if we have a course, for example, on kind of neurodiversity, or autism awareness for our support workers in schools, it opens up that conversation. Well, why is there a need for this, and where is the funding for that? That those workers in schools will see that day in, day out, because they're there, but it starts getting them to kind of really identify, well, what does that mean in wider society? And so that's where we are with that. So to John H, kind of to move on to your answer, we really are starting to widen that discussion about our curriculum in terms of the history, the politics, and the skills that are needed for as an individual, but not just within their workplaces as well. And it really is that we did try to a couple of years ago to kind of badge things and look at accreditation and look at, well, what are the transferable skills and transversal skills that the individual members really want. But we haven't gone much further in that debate, to be brutally honest. But what we're doing is ensuring that we have got breadth and depth across our offer. So we've got stuff on kind of well-being, we have stuff on support, as well as kind of those skills in terms of critical thinking and leadership. But there's the professional development there, but equally there's the personal development skills too. And I've just seen the bit on the chat. I will, as along with my slides, I'll share the underground map that we've got too.
Excellent. And Sarah J.
Yeah, just picking up on what Sarah H was saying. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm back at high school, because there were actually 3 Sarahs in my class, and we were all one after the other on the register. And my best friend at the time was called Sarah, and her last name began with H as well. So it just flashbacks here.
Sorry, we're triggering you.
No, but just to pick up on what Sarah H was saying, so we are kind of seeing this increasing breadth, obviously with variation across countries, but there's kind of growing attention on the need for transversal skills and broader knowledge and competencies, and then as well for example, the broader skill set that's going to be needed in the coming years. So you've got examples of trade unions providing courses related to addressing the climate and ecological crises and equipping workers with the skills and knowledge needed in that aspect. I think something that's going to be increasingly, I guess, needed in the coming years is, in addition to equipping workers with digital skills, actually, there's going to be a need to focus on how AI works and what it means to work alongside that, and what it can do, what it can't do in terms of navigating the fear that surrounds it, but also acknowledgement of the risks that are needed to work alongside it. And there's in discussions we've had with affiliates around AI, they've spoken about that real need for greater knowledge among workers and among unions as well, as to pass on that knowledge about what it means to work with digital tools and how they work and what the risks involved with those are. So I guess the curriculum, to my understanding, there's a varied picture to my knowledge, but there is, in some cases, it is quite broad and focuses on a broad range of skills and knowledge.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. I can't see any other hands going up at the moment. We do have a few more minutes. Just while we're waiting to see if anyone else does want to ask a question, I was just thinking, Tom, do you want to just say a few words about the next couple of events, just so people can save the dates?
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah V. There's 2 more events in this series. The next one, which is at the end of November, is looking at delivery. And that's going to focus on some of the questions we've touched on tonight, because these questions all overlap anyway. It's very, very hard to distinguish them too much. But by delivery, what we thought was that it would be about, is the classroom the right kind of context now to think about this? Is online going to be, whether we like it or not, the future? And I'm very much taken by what Sarah H said, that, to be honest, we all prefer face-to-face if we could, but practically speaking, it's very, very difficult for a lot of union members to physically transport themselves to some learning centre, and online may just be by far the most effective way to reach the greatest number of people. And then there's all the issues around funding, organisation, the role of the TUC, for example. I'd be interested to know from Sarah J, how many countries kind of organise all this through the Central Trade Union Confederation or confederations, because some have more than one, of course, or how many actually just leave it to individual unions to do their own thing, which is a kind of fundamental question, really. And if you're in a government department which is funding some of this stuff, either directly or through tax relief to employers, you've got a big interest in the quality approval, regulation, oversight of all of this, and it might be easier to do that through a central federation rather than union by union. So those are the kinds of delivery questions. And then the final seminar, which is at the end of the second week of December, is about policy, by which we mean, okay, we've discussed the history, if you like, and what's going on right now, but what about the future? And this is firmly geared, if you like, at the UK government, and perhaps I can, risk forecasting this. We might even have a Labour government within a year or two or something. And what would they do? What would a new Labour government do? What would good trade union education look like? Bearing in mind the really interesting comparisons that Sarah J was giving us from all around the world, and what's the most effective way to deliver something which is of value not just to employers, of course, but also to union members themselves. And at that final seminar, we have Christina McInerney, General Secretary of Unison, who Sarah H mentioned, who, as General Secretary of the biggest union in the country, will have some pretty clear views about what the future should look like. But we also have Kevin Around from the TUC, and the TUC, of course, plays a very, very important role in this. But as Sarah H was saying, that role has increasingly come under question, because it used to be about coordinating FE colleges. If they're no longer existing or funded, then per force, whether we like it or not, some unions may feel that they just have to do their own thing. So stay tuned. There's a lot more to come in this series. But if I could just grab the last few minutes to ask another question back to Sarah J, and it picks up on the question that John Holford raised about the kind of narrowing of the curriculum in some ways. If you can think, back in the day, we used to have a famous group of workers in Northumberland called the Pitmen Painters, miners who were learning through their union how to paint. And they became fantastically successful to the extent there was a small exhibition laid on at the National Gallery in London. And then a play was created about it all. But it was an example of the breadth and the creativity and the imagination that existed in those days. And best one in the world, we don't seem to have quite that level of creativity and breadth anymore. We do some very, very interesting courses on, welfare and mindfulness and green skills, but that's not quite the same. And my question to Sarah J is, what's happening around the world? A nice, simple, easy question. on that dimension, are there countries around the world, perhaps New Zealand, I don't know, which or who are still engaged in that wonderfully broad, creative, flowering kind of hopeful agenda, or have all the countries around the world and all the trade union movements just become terribly materialistic and pragmatic?
We've actually only got 8 minutes left, Tom, so you might not get as fully thought through an answer as you might want. Can I just sneak Alan Tuckett in, because I've just seen his hands up? Alan, do you want to
I really wanted to ask a question to Sarah H. I really enjoyed what you said about the confidence building and you negotiating with people that they felt they had enough of a shape of the learning to have a sense of agency and possibility through it. And yet what you know is that all sorts of the really important learning people do isn't very easily boxed into ways that you can negotiate or ask somebody to pay for it. And I wondered what pressures you were under to focus more of the activity onto things that tick the box of we've done A, we've done B, we've done C, and how far the process work that you clearly had some passion for has space to be there. Because underpinning this is a view I have anyway, from pretty much all the work I've ever done, that learning is the industrial skill, and you can learn it in any kind of context and it will leak across to another one. Of course, there are specifics to deal with it too. And it does strike me that the confidence doesn't much relate to the formal qualifications, and that the idea that you should accredit everything is a chimera to avoid.
Okay, we are going towards the end, so I'm going to ask the two Sarahs to respond to the points made by Tom and Alan, and then I think we'll have to call it a day, because I have a feeling the sword of Damocles comes down and the whole thing will be shut anyway. So Sarah, let's take Sarah J first.
Sure. I'm sorry to give an answer that crushes hope, Tom, or could crush hope. I have not come across any examples of that kind of more creative and learning for the joy of learning outside of being simply pragmatic. In the work I've done with TUAC so far. However, I will, ever the lawyer, I will caveat that by saying that doesn't mean those examples don't exist, because I think from I guess an advocacy perspective towards the OECD, we're really making the case that you need to recognize the roles trade unions play in skills development because they matter. And the way we're making the case is linking it to, because the OECD keeps pumping out this skills development is crucial in the context of the green and digital transition. So the work that I do has kind of got a skewed focus in picking up examples in terms of linking it to the skills that are going to be needed in those contexts. I would be overjoyed if I came across an example like the paintings that you referred to, and encouragement of creativity and learning for learning's sake as well. And I think that links, I think in some ways links to the question that Alan was raising and the point he made towards the end about learning to learn is in of itself a skill that has inherent value. And I think having the role unions play in creating that trust and creating that space to learn, it's something that's not very easy to measure and not very easy to kind of, I guess, measure the impacts. They're almost intangible, but they expand across, I imagine, such a broad scope and range.
Thanks, Sarah. And t'other Sarah?
Yeah, I think because I started my talk about just the importance of creating these kind of safe learning environments as local as possible, and it's for lifelong learning, for that kind of like learning for learning's sake. But if you're creating that safe environment for somebody, then you're creating that confidence, you're encouraging, and then they can go on and do further things. And I've got an example that I was in a committee, a very boring union committee meeting the other week. But actually someone put their hand up and they said, you know what, I am here, and I am here because of Unison's member learning program. I would finish school without any qualifications. I then went and did our Unison's kind of return to learn program, and actually I got it. Learning in the school classroom way was not for me, but learning how, in that creative community that you created was for me. And he then went on and went through the Open University, got a degree, and actually he's sitting on one of our senior leadership role. For me, it didn't matter whether he actually participated in the union as part of leadership, but actually he's gone on and done whatever he wanted to do, and that's from us creating that safe learning environment. And I think that is what I want to make sure that praxis, that process, that product is so important to our curriculum.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And there is just one more, just to read it out in case people haven't got their eye on the chat box, from Gavin McCann. There's just a comment to Tom actually saying, I think there are still lots of examples of that here in the UK, learning organised locally by the members, that about building confidence and socialising. So absolutely, really endorsing what you just said. So I think it falls to me now to thank both the Sarahs very much indeed for two excellent presentations that I think have stimulated a lot of thoughts and helped to concentrate our minds on some key issues about the trade union education curriculum, both globally and also here in the UK. And I'm sure it's slotted in very well with the two that are going to be following, which I hope everyone will also sign up to. Very important that we keep the torch burning, as they say, on trade union education. And I think all of us who have any kind of influence with the Labour Party need to make absolutely sure that they understand what the importance is of all this, and that they do make this quite a central part of their offer. So anything anyone can do with regard to that, I think is absolutely critical. And finally, to thank all the participants. It's really great to see you all here. on a Wednesday evening. So thank you for giving up your time, and I hope you've all got something out of it. I'm sure you have.